Regarding the argument from hiddenness, I don't think there's any good evidence that it's instinctive that we have any idea of God. I think the better people to listen to are not the missionaries, but the people themselves who say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about when you talk about this. I've got some other ideas going on here. Most perfect being is not like these, but I didn't understand his response to my most perfect being argument. Maybe we can talk about that later. Is agnosticism the default position? I don't know, a whole other issue. Why think the first cause has to be God? Well, it has to be God. Well, why? Okay. Suppose it's Oscar. Well, why think Oscar is God? I mean, you've got to have some idea of what God is supposed to be. You don't come up with an argument and then say, okay, whatever it is God. You've got to start with the conception of God, or you've got no hypothesis to test to begin with. You don't do the experiment and then formulate your hypothesis. That's data mining. You formulate your hypothesis and then form the experiment. God hypothesis is the only adequate explanation. People, I think, oh, I'm out of time. Well, that was the main point. I'll go and stop there.
All right, now we have an opportunity for you to ask one another questions, and do you want to just take turns asking questions, or does that sound okay? Or all right.
You take morality seriously, and you seem to have good moral principles. It's a personal question, but don't you wish you could ground your good moral principles in a real being who was even more perfectly moral than you?
No. I think that whole notion makes no sense for the Euthyphro argument. It makes no sense to talk about morality being grounded in a being, because if it's commands or something like that, they're going to be arbitrary. Off you go. The argument I presented, I'm sure you're very familiar with.
So you'd rather have a morality that doesn't go all the way up?
I'm not sure what you mean by all the way up.
Has no metaphysical basis?
I think it has a metaphysical basis in the sense that moral truths are ultimately necessary truths, logically necessary.
Okay, so the Platonic idea of the good is your God, your moral superior.
Well, I'm a Platonist, but I'm not Platonic in those respects.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not, yeah.
So
you see what I mean?
So it does go all the way up.
Yeah, there's metaphysical logically necessary truths, if that's what you mean by all the way up, yes.
Okay, but why wouldn't it be better if that's not just an abstract truth, but a quality of a concrete being?
I don't know that it makes any sense for morality to be a quality of a concrete being. I mean, morality consists of a set of logically necessary propositions. How could they be part of a being?
Not morality, not moral oughts, but moral goodness.
So wouldn't it be better if there's a morally good being, is what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's good if there are morally good beings.
Well, okay, this is a psychological question, not a logical question.
Okay.
It's like, wouldn't you wish that your friends were more moral? Wouldn't you wish that the president were a saint? Wouldn't you wish that everybody in the world were better? Of course you would.
Sure.
Well, then why, by the same principle, don't you at least wish that there were a supernatural being who was the super saint, God?
Well, what for? I mean, why would I want to wish that Santa Claus exists? The world would be richer. I mean,
yes.
Yeah. But that's not, do I really want a world populated by all these supernatural beings running around doing, it's just...
Again, I'm not arguing with you, I'm psychoanalyzing you. Wouldn't you... Did you ever wish you could reasonably believe in God? Did you ever envy the saints?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it always seemed to me that they believed something false.
Yeah.
And I don't envy people for believing something that I think is mistaken.
I guess I was trying to ask, not to be personal or embarrassing, but you seem to be a good philosopher, an intelligent man. I think your reasons are too silly for a good philosopher, so I'm wondering what your real reason for atheism is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of philosophers would disagree with you, and if you read the literature that they've written on this, you'll see that. So I stand by my arguments. Personally, I don't really care all that much whether or not God exists.
Really?
Yeah. If you could come up with a decent argument that would actually show that, I'd be happy to accept it.
You don't think it's a ridiculous Santa Claus-like superstition that you're morally obliged to divest the foolish universe?
I've started to come to think that, right? But I certainly didn't start off that way. As you get older, you get a little more set in your ways, as I'm sure you're aware. And
yeah, I've been sitting down. You've been wandering around. That's true.
Yeah.
Taking it off my butt.
And this is we're so friendly. We're okay. It's okay. But I mean, frankly, I appreciate a good reason. And if our someone were to publish tomorrow something in the Journal of Philosophy that really laid it out and laid out a great argument and established that God exists, I would accept it. I don't feel much in the way of personal commitment one way or the other.
Suppose God came down and performed a miracle, made gold letters appear in the sky at 6 o'clock saying, I am God, ha-ha, all you atheists.
Yeah.
And invited NASA to send up rockets and explore them, and they couldn't explain them, and it was a standing miracle. And then voices came from the letters saying, everything in the Bible is true, I am exactly as such and such believes. What would your reaction be?
Yeah.
No, this is a thought experiment.
Well, I don't. If it said everything in the Bible is true, I would know it was false because I've read a lot of the Bible. It contains self-contradictions. It contains moral falsehoods. So I know there's a problem there. But to get to your point, I mean, if there was something that was generally well tested as a miracle, right? God coming down and say, look, it's me, and I'm going to do these miracles, and I'll do them repeatedly, like he did with the the sheep's cloth for Gideon, right? I'm going to do it 3 times just so you know it's me. And the magicians get full access. It's not an ampule hidden away that no one can open that the miracle is occurring in. It's right out there. I mean, if you have that kind of evidence, right, and any scientist or magician or skeptic could go up and say, okay, prove it, then yeah. I mean, you've got good evidence that God exists in that situation.
That would convince your mind, but what would it do to your life?
What would it do to my life? I would want to figure out what this being amounts to, what its intentions are, and go from there.
Suppose it said you have to be a saint.
Okay.
Okay.
Right? If you really got this God.
Hey, God, you're listening. He's willing. Glad to get that out.
Yeah. How about the reverse, though? Are there any circumstances where you'd be willing to be an atheist? To say all this is just crazy. It's just Santa Claus all over again. These arguments are terrible, and I just give up.
That's a fair question. So, or let's make it even stronger. Suppose I died and somehow I had consciousness after death, but found out that there was no God.
Okay.
That would be the supreme shock. If I found out, let's say that my parents weren't my parents, that I was a bastard, that would be a shock. If I found out that my grandfather was Adolf Hitler, that would be an even bigger shock.
Yeah.
If I found out that I was really a Martian, this is planet Earth, isn't it? I'm kind of absent-minded. That would even be a bigger shock. But if I found out that there was no God, I think that would, if not tempt me to suicide, at least discombobulate my sense of identity. Because if God's my creator, I have no more independent identity from him than Hamlet does from Shakespeare.
Do you think you could establish your own identity?
No.
No? Do you think you could, create a purpose for yourself?
I could create artificial purposes, of course. I play games.
Yeah. You
But
wouldn't
games
take them
get boring.
seriously.
Games get boring.
Yeah.
And I
You
wouldn't,
would-
I
you would
wouldn't
think-
want a boring life after death.
So you would think that all the people that you're dealing with now, the world as it is without God, would just be a complete waste, or worthless to you.
No, I'd say the universe would be still pretty okay, but it
Okay.
wouldn't be as great.
Okay. But is there anything, prior to death, anything now, where, someone publishes some fantastic argument, we'd say, okay, yeah, I think that's right now. Do you think that could happen?
It could.
Yeah.
We haven't seen all the arguments. We're just beginners.
Yeah.
10,000 years from now, we'll look back in 20th century or 21st century in philosophy, and we'll call them the pre-something or others, as we call the pre-Socratics, the pre-Socratics. Yeah, that's, but having an open mind, though it's essential, is a means to an end.
Yeah.
It's like having an open mouth. It's a means to the end of clamping it shut on something solid that you can eat.
But I wonder, though, for a lot of people, religious belief seems kind of like you were describing it. It would just be, life would just be pointless without it. Everything would just be useless. You might as well kill yourself without it. And I wonder, with someone who holds that view, are they really free to accept it or reject it? Is their faith a free faith? If the only alternative to faith is saying life is worthless and I might as well die.
It's most free, precisely because those words, life would be meaningless without this, are the words of lovers.
Mm-hmm.
If you're totally in love with somebody, you would say, they're not just a part of my life. They're like my other eye through which I see everything. And when they die, it's like the light goes out on everything, not just a piece of the pie. So that's the function that God performs that nothing else can perform for the whole.
So when a spouse dies, might you not instead say, well, they wouldn't want me to be this way. They'd want me to be there for other people.
Yeah, because you're still alive, but you only have one eye, not two. So you lack that sense of perspective.
Okay. Question?
Okay.
Okay.
But, well, we'd better let the audience have a chance.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to bring, there's a microphone here, and you can come up to the microphone. Eric, are there any other microphones? This is the only microphone. So if you would like to bring a question, we'll take them as long as we have time. Please be sure that your question is a question and not only a comment. Thank you.
Is it on? Okay, this is for Dr. Atheist. What do you believe happens to you when you die?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Nothing?
Yep.
So you just nothing? Okay.
That's it. Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Scott Broussard, and I'm a philosophy student here, and I have a question for Dr. Kreeft. In your 2005 audio series, Faith and Reason, The Philosophy of Religion, you said the following: atheists certainly aren't stupider than most people. They tend to be smarter, better educated, more logical, and more scientific, and the scientific method is by far the most reliable method we have ever found for finding truth. In fact, it's the only method which has ever succeeded in giving us certainty. If you think the scientific method really is the most reliable method we have ever found for finding truth, and the scientific method consistently refutes supernatural claims, then what role does faith and theism have?
Well, what you quoted was an objection that I went on to answer. I don't think the scientific method...
I've listened to the audio, and it doesn't, at no point does it sound like an objection to anything.
I don't believe the scientific method is the only method for finding the truth. I think it is the best method for finding natural truths, but I don't think it is the best method for finding even philosophical truths. And I don't think that the scientific method can possibly be the only method by which we can find truths, because if it is, it self-contradicts itself, because there's no scientific method that proves that proposition, that the scientific method is the only method for finding certain truths.